I don't even know where to begin with this one. Let's just say this week has been an emotional one. I won't spoil anything, but if you love watching me suffer, then I think you'll really enjoy this one. Oh man. Alright, let's get this over with. Last week we didn't quite fill the vault as much as I would have liked, so just before reset I went and completed a couple of Mythic Zeros for an additional vault slot. I had big plans coming into this reset. I wanted to clear as much raid content as possible and unlock all dungeon slots for the vault. This means I'd need to do at least 8 Mythic dungeons. That said, however, not all of them have to be Mythic Plus. I could also run Mythic Zeros to pad it out, and I wanted to time at least 4 of those runs, or maybe just finish them. We start today with an item level of 492 and our total score is 339. This week was an interesting one, because we have the Mythic Dungeon Weekly. However, this time it doesn't quite offer gear as a reward, not the conventional way anyway. This time the quest rewards you with 2 antique bronze bullion. This means I can purchase my second item from the Awakened vendor. There was a known bug at the beginning of the week where the bronze bullion from the Mythic Dungeon Weekly counted towards the overall count, meaning if I did the weekly before getting one from the raid, the one in the raid would get cancelled out. So I went and cleared LFR first, just to be safe. I cleared all of LFR, picking up my bronze bullion, a dagger and a shield for my off-spec, and I also started doing something a little, I don't know how to call it exactly, but I was just getting sick of players needing on absolutely everything, which meant lower geared players miss out. So I decided if you can't beat them, join them. So I won a belt and some boots, which I then traded to a hunter who was next in line on the rolls, and they actually needed the items. I still feel kinda dirty doing it this way, but when 5-15 players are winning items and then asking if anyone wants to buy it from them, yeah, I don't know man, it just annoyed me. I then went and completed the new Valdrakken Weekly for the Spark. This involved all of the stuff we'd previously been doing in the Emerald Dream, so this went super fast. Unless you're AFK of course. Ain't that right, Tenny? You did taste rather yummy though. After that I decided to run 4 Mythic Zeros for the weekly and to practice my rotation, as I felt like I needed it. I changed around a few spells as it didn't feel right. I also swapped a couple of weak auras around. I targeted a couple of places for trinkets, anything to replace what I had. And I ended up with the Iridius Fragment from Halls of Infusion and the Signal Flare from Brackenhide Hollow. Not great choices I know, but it's all I can get at the minute. And whilst we progress through these Mythic Zeros, I thought I'd answer a couple of questions I've been getting on the previous episodes. Firstly, why did I choose the Thorncaller Claw as my first choice, as it's more of a single target item and usually not the first priority for Mythic Plus, which is my main focus? Well, as I didn't have great weapons in the first place, I felt it was the right choice. If I already had decent enough weapons, I probably would have chosen the Neltharian's class trinket instead, which is a great trinket for enhancement. At least that's what Wowhead tells me. The second thing was about the build I'm running, and it's been recommended by a couple of you guys to try the Storm build, or easier variants of the Elementalist build I'm currently running. See, I'm not great with change as it is. Even tweaking 1 or 2 things in the talent tree I find very difficult. I've now spent 3 weeks getting used to the current build, and this is the most optimal in terms of damage for Mythic Plus. So I really want to nail this build, plus it makes everything more challenging, so whilst I appreciate and always welcome tips and advice, I'll always do what I feel is best for me. Next, there was a request to bring back the spell tracker that I originally had for the beginning of the Affliction Warlock series. I actually forgot about this, to be honest, and when I swapped over to the new PC halfway through that series, I totally forgot to re-enable it. So that's on me, I guess. It should have been there from the beginning. If I forget it again, call me a buttface in the comments or something. In fact, just do it anyway, why not? Oh, and I'll update you guys on the Feral Druid and Survival Hunter a little later in the video, but let's just say they're not quite progressing as fast as I would have hoped. With the Mythic Zero and Valdrakken Weeklies complete, it was now time to open the cache and take a look at the vault. From the cache of Awakened Dreams, we looted a champion neck with high crit and haste. Not long after I equipped, socketed and gemmed a new neck piece. Good job, Dilly. From the vault we had the options of champion hands, another champion neck with high haste and crit, champion legs, a hero chest, and a hero ruby whelp shell trinket. I decided against the raid gear as its only champion. I chose not to take the ruby whelp shell as it's not great for me and I can easily obtain one through ruby life pools if I really wanted it. So I decided to take the hero chest purely because it was hero. I felt like it was the only option other than taking gems. After the vault I went and spent my antique bronze bullion on the Neltharian's Call to Dominance trinket. I've really struggled so far and I've been rocking double on use, which seems pretty terrible for enhancement as we don't have any cooldowns that line up with them. So the fact that I keep forgetting to press them anyway, it seemed like a no-brainer to me. Next week, I'll likely pick up the Seal of Filial Duty, which would have been a great choice this week too, but I personally feel like the trinket made more sense. And I mean, I don't have to wait very long for the next piece, so I upgraded a few bits, prioritising the weapon, then the class trinket, and then I spent whatever I could left over on the rest of my gear. I converted the new hero chest into tier, made sure it was enchanted, and my total item level now sits at 500. After practicing my rotation through Mythic Zeros, I still didn't feel like I'd quite gotten the hang of everything just yet. I was still becoming very flustered at times, thinking about the priority of a few spells, but I decided it was time to test myself in some keys. So I listed my own Azure Vaults +5. And being a +5, we'd have to deal with an additional affix. So this week's affixes are Tyrannical, at +5 would get Incorporeal, and at +10, which I highly doubt will reach anytime soon, we get Spiteful. Now, I made some mistakes going into this and I didn't give it much thought. But to start things off, I totally forgot to adjust my build so I could actually deal with the Incorporeal. Nor did I purposely form an appropriate group to deal with it. I wasn't bothered about score, I wasn't worried about the composition. I like to give players a chance, and spec really doesn't matter in these level of keys. Luckily, the comp I did put together had all of this covered. We started the key and the tank pulled the lashers into the next room, which is where we started to DPS. I immediately got flustered and I forgot which spells to prioritise. One thing to note as we progress through today's episode, I keep misspending my primordial wave stacks on Lightning Bolt. Sometimes I derp by using Ice Shock at the wrong time, and I tend to strafe like a PvP god. Maybe that's the ADHD in me, I just can't stand still. We get to the first boss and I feel like my damage is still really lacking, but single target seems to be where I perform a little better, so we'll see I guess. The first lot of trees spawned and I could see we were bunched up in one half, so I knew I'd probably have to move to the other side, but we didn't quite get to that point as the tank went down. They got picked up again and stood in the stump. You probably don't want to stand in those. With poor positioning and everything else going on, my damage really sucked. But if I'm completely honest, over the past couple of seasons now, damage has never really been the issue. The issue with all of these dungeons is survivability. So although I like to be very critical about my damage output, as it also pushes me to do better, the damage is more than good enough for these keys. We get back to the boss for attempt number 2. The first explosion came out, we took a ton of AoE damage, and there's one thing we've not mentioned so far, Incorporeal. I'll be completely honest, I totally forgot all about it and tunneled super hard during this fight, I didn't even see it. Consuming Stomp goes off and we start losing party members. I'm also really struggling in terms of positioning, I didn't know where best to stand. We wipe and return for a third attempt, which lasts a little longer this time but proves too difficult for the team to deal with. It seemed like the tank was struggling with some of the damage from the boss, trees weren't being cleared, and we lost players to stuff they really shouldn't be standing in. So I decided I didn't want to waste any more of my time as this clearly wasn't going anywhere. I thanked everyone for joining and I called it. Well, that wasn't the start I wanted. I then decided to sign up to a few keys instead of running my own, which is how I ended up in this Alderman +5. We started this run by once again getting incredibly flustered with the first pack. The priest also gave me PI and I immediately felt like, well, that was wasted. I managed to redeem myself in terms of damage and we get to the first boss. The first totem comes out and I totally forget to use Bloodlust. They did call for it in party chat, but honestly, I block the majority of chat out when I'm in keys. I can't focus on mechanics, rotation, positioning and re-chat. The tank stands in a thundering slam and goes down. I then have to kite the boss around the room until the paladin picks them back up. Sadly, we lose the hunter, there's too many ads alive, the tank goes down again, and we end up wiping. Round 2 didn't start well when I took aggro from the ads, the tank failed to pick them up, the group failed to CC the caster, and the caster's chain lightning of all things takes me out. They're using my own spells against me, man. I decide to ank, heal myself up a little, run to the totem and quickly interrupt the caster, but the rest of the ads pounce on top of me and take me down again. The rest of the group go down and members start leaving. Now, I did come back here on a 4, but given the start I've had so far, when I thought I pressed record, I actually stopped this recording. So there's no footage for that one, I'm afraid. However, you didn't really miss very much. We basically wiped to trash before the first boss, ugly words were exchanged, and members left. I then returned here on another 4, and guess what? This is where I realised I wasn't recording. You know what happened in this one? I don't really need to go into detail, right? Of course not. Yet another group failing to make it past the first boss. But we did make it there this time. With 4 out of 4 keys not even finished, let alone timed, I jumped into a knockout +4. My luck had to change soon, surely. My positioning in this place so far this season has been pretty awful. Not to mention the tanks that like to turn frontals into you, but this wasn't what worried me about this tank. You see, we cleared the first ballista without the additional pack that most groups tend to take. We then cleared the second and third, but we still didn't clear the patrolling pack, nor did we clear the pack in the middle of the boss area, which really confused me. But this is their key, their run, and their route. I'll always follow, even if I disagree on anything. The first ad takes a while to go down, and I see no one standing by the ballista to interrupt. This has always been something that a ranged player takes care of, whether that be a DPS or a healer, never a melee. The rogue realises this and tried setting it off. Sadly, they go down as the boss's ability goes off and the group wipes. We return and I'm hoping we take down the pack before the boss, as it's close to one of the ballistas.
Nope.
We take down the first ad and it's clear no one's going to bother with the interrupt mechanic. So I stand by and wait for the boss to cast Eruption. Then I click on the ballista to interrupt. I don't remember ever doing this mechanic before, having only played tanks and melee DPS in this place. You'll realise that in just a moment. The second interrupt goes through, but I start using the ballista for the third interrupt and I realise I may be doing it slightly earlier than I should. So I click off of the ballista and it doesn't let me click on it again. And by the time I can actually click on it, it's far too late. This causes a third wipe, players start blaming me and leave the group. I mean, sure, I messed up on that one and caused the wipe, but if I'm having to run to the ballista as a melee DPS, I'm losing so much damage. If you're a ranged DPS or a healer, you don't lose so much as you can be placed near the ballista and the boss at the same time. Oh well, at least I know not to click off of it now. You'd think I would have given up for the week, but I decided to give this one last attempt. I needed at least one run completed for the vault, or this week would be a massive failure on my part, so I jumped into a Nelfaris 4. And I don't quite know how to word this one, but most tanks I've had today weren't quite up to the task, and that's completely fine by the way, we all start somewhere. But in pretty much every run so far today, nothing went right for the tanks, and this one was no different. Now, I'm not going to sit here bashing tanks, nor the tank we had in this run, which was a really nice player by the way. I sat there talking to them for a good 10-15 minutes after the run, going over the dungeon, their character, and offering some advice. They only recently returned to the game a few days ago, so this was all really new to them. But if I could offer one bit of advice to anyone tanking in keys, maybe even for the very first time, you must pull more than 2 mobs. Firstly, you will upset your DPS as they can't AoE and look good on the damage meters. The healer may also get bored as there's very little for them to do other than deal minor damage. Some healers even benefit from having more mobs. But most importantly, you're on a timer. Only tanking 2 mobs at a time isn't very efficient. Ideally, you want to pull at least 2 or 3 groups at a time depending on the affixes and the key level. This did frustrate me, I will admit, but probably more so due to how the day had been so far. It was also hard for me to deal damage at times as I kept taking aggro. We eventually got to the first boss and although we lost the hunter to the lava wave, we picked them back up and we took the boss down. It was quite messy at times though, but as we make our way to the next boss, the tank decides to take a slight detour. I just don't know anymore, man. We started the second boss and Dilly was pumping. Oh fudge, too much pump!
Oopsie!
The first chains come out and I selfishly break mine first. I did this because I'm melee and a lot squishier than the Rep Paladin, though sadly there's too much damage going out and the tank goes down. This obviously causes a wipe. We return for round 2 and unfortunately the tank goes down before anyone can break their chains. Round 3 was pretty much the same, although I did notice the tank turning their back on the boss quite often. That's never a good thing. And that was the end of Nelfaris. 6 runs so far, 6 failed keys, not a single run finished. So if you're feeling sorry for Dilly or maybe you're enjoying my pain and suffering, then perhaps consider giving this video a like. Ha, pity likes, I'll take it. Alright, let's take a minute to update you all on the Feral Druid and Survival Hunter, which I'm playing on stream by the way, so if you want to see these in action, make sure you're following me over on Twitch. The Survival Hunter has been the one I've spent the most time on so far. I've done way more keys on this guy, but the output just isn't there. I've really struggled with the rotation on all three of the specs so far, it just hasn't clicked. Though recently I've started to understand all three of them a little bit more, and I'm slowly improving. Remember, the plan is to take all three of these to 3k rating, so we're not stopping anytime soon. But the thing is, with Survival, their new tier sucks. I have the 4 set and the output just isn't there, to the point where most Survival Hunters are still using Season 3's tier set. It just doesn't do enough damage. Sadly for me, this is the first time playing the Hunter since the Burning Crusade, so that's not really an option for me. I don't have any set gear for the Feral Druid, but the output is only slightly lower than the Hunter. But I think that's purely because I lack the understanding of how it's played. Until very recently anyway. I've struggled to understand the way of snapshotting, and I'm not even going to try and explain it. I'm close to KSH on the Hunter, and I'm starting to feel somewhat comfortable with the spec. I feel like it's going to be so much better, and I'm going to appreciate the spec a lot more once the tier set actually gets buffed, but we'll see. As for the Druid, well, the Druid currently sits around 1500 score, and I feel less comfortable playing him right now, but I'm definitely improving. So out of Enhancement, Feral and Survival, I feel like Survival is the easiest to pick up and understand. Enhancement is by far the most difficult to play, with Feral sitting somewhere in the middle. They all have their own unique way of playing, but I do really enjoy them all. Though I do miss playing the Rep Paladin, I will admit. It's okay, I've been secretly playing that one too. And in terms of where all three of these specs are currently ranked for Mythic Plus, well, I do love an underdog. I returned the next day and was determined to time a key, or at least finish one for God's sake. I signed to a few keys whilst practicing my DPS on some target dummies and got invited to a Nel Forest +3. This was it, time to redeem myself and end this awful run of luck. I was excited about this one because I was up against a Feral Druid. We started the run and I was super happy to see the first couple of mobs being dragged into the next pack. It took a while to get going as this was the first key of the day, but we got there in the end, and it's always nice when you're below the tank on damage. That's right, nerf their sigils, but their damage? Nah, it's all good. The first boss goes down nicely and the damage is really even, for this fight anyway. Though my AoE in this place was horrible. I spent far too long waiting for groups to be gathered and to use the chains. So once I actually got going, it just looked like I did nothing on the damage meters. The first lot of chains on the second boss went a little too fast, but the healer handled it like a champ. Fair play, because that was quite silly of us to be honest. We don't learn our lesson and we do it all over again on the second lot, this time losing the Druid and the Priest. Oopsie. Thankfully, we're able to finish off the boss. The third boss went really well, until the tank forgot to move from the boss's leap mechanic. Then I cried and I had to run away. The Druid could have rezzed, but felt like it wasn't necessary. Oh well, shamans can tank. The last boss was very typical. I picked up a treasure to break the shield. It only takes 2 now, but no one else bothers picking one up. And it took over 10 seconds to break it. It doesn't sound like a long time when I say this, but it really is. Second time round goes so much better. We take the boss down and we finally break the curse. We +2'd this key, taking our total score to 496. Didn't receive any loot, but not only did we finally finish a mythic keystone, we also timed it. Holy moly donut shop. I decided to continue and try my luck. I really wanted more progression and more crests to improve my gear. Now, remember the Nel Forest run from the day before? Well, welcome to Ruby Life Pools +3. I slowed DPS as I assumed the tank would pull the first mob into the next pack.
Nope.
When the mob died, I was certain this pack would then get taken into the next one.
Nope.
This continued to the first boss. I'll say no more. The first boss was a little messy, with no one interrupting the boss's cast, including myself as I tunneled so much. The healer struggled to deal with the encounter from time to time, especially when they had to deal with the Chillstorm mechanic. I tried helping, but I'm not actually sure I did that much. The second boss was where the group started falling apart, with player positioning being all over the place, constantly standing in fire, and occasionally pulling ads on the side of the ring. Yeah, those guys really hurt. We had 17 minutes to finish this place when we started the boss. 4 wipes later, now we only have 5 minutes remaining, which doesn't sound great when the tank continues to pull 1 or 2 mobs at a time. I turned into the go guy and tried encouraging them to pull more. Other players may have said it a little differently. We continued like this with players ninja pulling to the boss, and we started the last encounter with 2 minutes remaining. If we wipe now, we're not timing this place. Fire was placed everywhere, Movement was horrible, and could someone please explain the wind? How do you know which direction it's gonna blow in next? The paladin nearly stitches me up, I panic and nearly die, but thankfully we time this run with 15 seconds remaining, taking our total score to 648, and we loot a back piece with haste and mastery. But that wasn't enough. I needed more, so I jumped into a Halls of Infusion +4. It started off at a really nice pace and my DPS felt a lot better. It felt like I'd made some improvements. The first boss went down really well, 0 deaths so far, nice. The frog boss was really messy though, with the entire group spread out. The small frogs were everywhere. They did take me down at one point where I failed to get away from them. I did what I could to kite and CC. I also threw in some chain lightnings from time to time. Gotta pad those meters, right? Then we get to the scariest encounter for some players, especially healers. That wasn't the third boss. Nope, we smashed that fight. We lost the hunter in the process though. I'm talking about the bridge boss, of course. This actually went okay, though the mini boss at the end, even on Tyrannical, really hurts. The first phase on the last boss went really well. Then we made it back to the ads where everyone started interrupting them all. This never gets old. We pick everyone back up, we lose the warrior again, and we take down the boss. We end up 2 chests in this run, taking our total score to 816, but we get no loot from the chest. In order to fully redeem myself, it only made sense that I list my Azure Vaults and attempt this once more. So that's what I did. We started this run and the tank wasn't messing around, pulling the first few packs together where the group completely destroyed them. The paladin made a boo-boo and pulled the pack at the top of the stairs. These guys can be pretty darn brutal and skipped 99% of the time. That said, the group handled it really well. We absolutely destroyed the first boss and I thought we'd struggle being a complete melee group. But the guys did a great job getting rid of all of the trees, or most of them anyway. I really thought that'd be more of an issue. The trash packs leading up to the second boss were really fun to DPS, as the tank continued pulling pack into pack. I struggled with movement from time to time, but it's all part of learning, I guess. This did, however, make me really miss my prop warrior. Maybe I should tank on something this season after all. Nah. The pool just before the second boss room with the 2 guards can be quite challenging for some tanks, especially when you chain them into the next group. But this tank went full beast mode, no messing around. What really helped with this run, however, was the amount of interrupts and CC. This group did a fantastic job handling everything that was thrown at us. The second boss went down with no issues at all. The third boss was an interesting one though, being a full group of melee. On this one I decided to give the other guys more space when needed, as they did far more damage than I did. Then we get to the last boss with 19 minutes remaining. 0 deaths too. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I was going to wait with Bloodlust until the first bunch of crystals spawned, but seeing as everyone used their cooldowns, I decided to pop it straight away. The first lot of crystals went down really fast. Everyone was avoiding the balls on the ground. Then the second bunch of crystals spawned, and these ones took slightly longer to take down, but it went just fine. The third bunch of crystals spawned, and the group started taking a lot of damage. We take these crystals down, and I don't realise there's an arcane eruption under the boss. Yep, I was the first and only death, as we do end up timing this run, 3 chests in the key and taking our total score to 985. No loot, but damn, I think I needed that. What a run to end on.